Charities of Boston Labouré Center. I want to thank Jake Bombard and the entire team here, as well as the board of directors for their help in getting this set up and for hosting us. And I also want to thank Carrie Jordan and Michelle Goldberg from the City Council Central staff for all of their help in making this happen tonight. My name is Councilor at Large Ayanna Presley. I'm the founder and chair of the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities. I want to remind everyone that this hearing is being recorded and will be broadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8 and RCN 82. Please silence your cell phone and other electronic devices. This is the second of a series of policy briefings the female councilors on the Boston City Council will be hosting under the umbrella of the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities. This idea was spearheaded and initiated by our council president, Michelle Wu. I'm very excited to host this briefing tonight, specifically looking at community-based providers of early education and care and how we can best support their professional development. I'm so proud to be partnering with this panel of experts. I hope we'll be able to speak candidly about barriers that currently exist and come up with some innovative ideas to break those barriers down. You know, one of the things that I've learned in my conversations with providers, and I believe our panelists will highlight this evening, it is clear through my conversations and experience that these community-based providers of early education and care are small businesses. Obviously, they educate and care for for our youth, but they are small businesses. And while professional development on the curriculum is important, it has become clear to me that these operators could also benefit from small business training and support. It is critical for the success of our children, but we need to support them as entrepreneurs and as a workforce that is critical to our economy. Thank you. And thank you. Okay, and I would like to quickly recognize my colleagues who have joined us this afternoon. Again, this is an initiative spearheaded by Councilor Wu, historic in its own right. This is an issue that we all care about and each have an area of focus and concentration on. And so I want to acknowledge my at-large colleague, Anissa Sabi-George, District 4 City Councilor Andrea Campbell, and Council President and at-large Councilor Michelle Wu. Do any of you have any opening statements?
I have a quick statement.
Okay.
Thank you. I do have a quick statement. I just want to thank Councilor Presley for chairing our second in our series, and just sort of recap very quickly what we did in series number 1. We had the pleasure of holding our hearing at Horizons for Homeless Children and focused our hearing around child care options and opportunities for children and families that are experiencing homelessness. And I'm really proud of our work to date. Emily Levine is with us today from Horizons for Homeless Children. Just really proud of the work that we've done around supporting families who are experiencing homelessness and really adding to sort of the opportunities that we're making available for children who are experiencing homelessness. I do have to say that I need to leave early. I have another commitment, so at some point I'm going to sneak out, and I ask for your forgiveness now, and I'm just going to do it quietly when it happens. But thank you, Councilor Presley.
She'll watch the tape, I have no doubt. Councilor Kim, opening statement.
Thank you, Councilor Presley, and I'm very much looking forward to this evening. And thank you all for being here this evening on a cold, rainy night. I am honored to not only serve with my female colleagues, but to partner on this initiative. This is an initiative that's going to take us through several conversations over the course of the year, really touching upon different issues. Councilor President Wu will have some hearings later in the year. Mine is going to be later in probably, I think, September or October. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation. But more importantly, after we have these conversations, we do come back together. We do talk about what can we do next. We understand many of these issues are happen at the state level. And so we need to make sure that we're advocating at the state level as well, and we can't do that work alone. But when you get 4 women who come together, we're all about getting things done. So I'm excited to be here tonight with you. I, too, apologize because I have to cut out early for a commitment and a meeting I have in Dorchester. Sometimes very challenging to schedule all 4 of us, but I wouldn't have missed this. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Councilor Presley, and your team for the hard work.
Councilor Wu?
I just want to echo the thanks to our chairwoman here for chairing each of these sessions, and to all my colleagues, excuse me, to all my colleagues for taking on their particular topics of interest. Councilor Presley has been working on this particular issue for a long time, way before we initiated our briefing series. So I'm really excited to see it dovetail with what we're doing together as well. And just wanted to flag, Councilor Sabi George sort of alluded to this, but we already took action on something that came out of her policy briefing, and she introduced a resolution in partnership with the rest of us, but she led the council in getting formally on record and supporting the state legislation that came up as such an important piece of support at our last conversation. So we are making advances, but such an important topic to be talking about investing in the future of Boston through this very, very important investment in our youth and the caretakers who are taking care of our youth. So thank you for joining us. Thank you.
All right, and before we get into the formal program, I did just want to, since there are many new faces here, I just want to reiterate at every policy briefing that although we are 4 women working intentionally on this issue, that we are not genderizing this issue. We know that the issue of early education and care is one of relevance to every family, whatever your model. This is about the stabilization of family, of our workforce, and the growth of our economy as well. And so all of our male colleagues stand in solidarity and support what it is that we're doing. We just happen to be leading in these specific spaces. We also wanted to make it a point, not only to ensure that we would have a translation, but that we would provide childcare. And so I want to thank Angelique Perazzi and Jake for making that connection so that we can make sure that the very industry that we're talking about and the need for there to be affordable, accessible care, that we are providing that as we do these briefings. So thank you for providing childcare this evening. Okay, so I would like to introduce our panel, and again, we really do see these briefings as more of a dialogue than a monologue. I know we haven't gotten to that part yet, so it might feel like a monologue right now, but we really do want this to be conversational and interactive. You know, all of us really try to model cooperative governing and believe that the solutions come from actively listening to the experts and the providers and the advocates. So really looking forward to what will come out of this. First, we're going to hear from Ann Douglas, who's Executive Director and Associate Professor at the Institute of Early Education Leadership and Innovation at UMass Boston. Yes, great. And you're up. And you can one more time just say your name and affiliation for the record. Okay. And then whatever insights, observations you would like to share. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm Ann Douglas. I'm a faculty member at UMass Boston in early childhood education and the executive director of our new Institute on Early Education Leadership and Innovation. And just by way of a little more background, I first started working in Boston in the early care and education field at Project Hope in Dorchester in Upham's Corner back in the 1990s, and I started a child care center there for the families who lived in the shelter. And have been working in the early care and education community in the city of Boston for the last 2 decades. I've worked in family child care, center-based child care, Head Start, and in Boston Public Schools early childhood. So what the insight that I always carry with me in all the work that I do now that I'm at UMass Boston is that what I discovered and what I saw every day working in early childhood programs and with children and families was the incredible strength, passion, intelligence, and commitment and resilience of early childhood educators who do this work every single day, whether it's in family child care homes, in centers, in Head Starts, or in schools. So I think that's a theme that I will carry through in my comments as I talk today. One of the things that I was asked to say a little bit about was just kind of some data about who the workforce is in Boston in early care and education. So I'm going to share just a few data points about the childcare workforce in the city, and then I'm going to talk about what I see as the two really big gaps when it comes to workforce development and supporting and strengthening the childcare workforce, and then I'm going to talk about possible solutions.
Great.
So people have been talking a lot recently about this crisis in the childcare workforce, and what I believe is at the heart of this crisis is really a continued and long-term failure to invest in supporting and strengthening the workforce. This, as I said, is a workforce that has probably the most passion and commitment and dedication I've ever seen in my life. And at the same time, we don't provide the kinds of supports, whether it's compensation, professional development, or maybe just as important as all those, the respect that this workforce deserves. Children in the city of Boston, before they enter school, the majority of them are in childcare settings between the ages of birth to 4, and children are often spending 40, 50 hours a week in childcare settings. So what happens before children enter school is in those early care and education settings is incredibly important and influential. It influences their early learning, it supports their family so their parents can work and support their family. But what we tend to hear, what's been going on 5, 10 more years, has been an unbelievable focus and emphasis and investment in pre-K and what happens when you're 4. And so what I want to know is what is going on in this city before you're 4 when it comes to childcare. So I think that's something, we know that children birth to 4, 80% of their brain development takes place during those first 4 years. So we cannot afford to wait until children are 4 to worry about, is there a seat for them in a pre-K classroom? Is there a qualified teacher? We need to be doing that from the time they're born. So what do we know about the childcare workforce? What we know is that the workforce is incredibly diverse. About a quarter of the workforce has a bachelor's degree, a small percentage of workforce has a graduate degree, and a large percentage has some college or something less than associate's degree. So there's a really diverse sector of the workforce, people who have college degrees and who don't have college degrees. That's been a big focus in a lot of the workforce development so far. In the city of Boston, the best available data we have says that about a quarter of the workforce's primary language is Spanish, about 2/3 of the workforce's primary language is English, and then there's a number of other languages that make up that small 6 or 7%. The average salary for a full-time person working in childcare is about $24,000 a year. That's less than half what a comparably educated and credentialed teacher in a Boston public school would make. Far less than half. And our teachers work year-round by and large. They don't work 10 months. This workforce is the most racially and linguistically and culturally diverse workforce in the entire education sector. This is an incredible asset that we need to preserve and support. 25% of early childhood educators in the city are African American, 30% are Hispanic, 28% are white, and about 4% are Asian, and the remainder responded to demographic surveys with mixed or multiple racial and ethnic backgrounds. As Councillor Presley noted, this sector, the early care and education sector, is a small business sector. It's made up of hundreds of small businesses. So it's very different than what happens in the public school sector. We've got about 200 licensed childcare centers in the city of Boston and about 400 to 600 licensed family childcare providers. So this is important because the way we support a workforce, if we're a small business sector, which we are, we would do workforce development and support very differently than we're doing right now. Most of these businesses are owned by women and minorities, another really important part of the equation. And the other thing we know about these businesses is that quality when it comes to early care and education varies wildly. We have really, really high quality programs, and we have programs that are really, really struggling. So again, just incredible diversity, and that's no surprise, it's a small business sector. There's not one size fits all, that's the beauty of it. Families choose centers where they feel that their child will be best served. Okay, so what are the two big gaps? The two big gaps, that I see when it comes to workforce development are first business supports. As Councillor Presley noted, there is almost nothing happening in the childcare sector that is focused on supporting the business side of things. What that means is if you have a business, and we know the business model is fragile, it's very hard to pay teachers well, charge parents something they can afford, and run a strong, healthy business. It's not easy. And yet there's almost no supports out there. We're busy trying to teach people how to deliver this and that literacy curriculum or do more STEM learning. And at the same time, their business is struggling, sometimes closing down, and so building on a crumbling foundation to try to do this kind of instructional supports, it doesn't work. We have to strengthen that business model. So that's one. The second gap is leadership development. And when I talk about leadership, I'm talking about the leadership of educators. There's almost no support for cultivating the expertise of educators to be the leaders of change. We've got experts coming in telling people what to do, but we don't see the expertise that's within our workforce and think about how might we cultivate that to actually achieve more transformative change. As a result of those gaps, we have businesses that are closing down, particularly in urban neighborhoods, and we're losing talent. We're seeing educators leave the field, especially our experienced educators, the people who have the most to offer in terms of mentoring new people coming into the field, being leaders in organizations, and we can't afford to lose those people. We need to find ways to retain them in the field. So what can we do? So I'm going to move to solutions. So since those are the gaps I've identified, it's probably no surprise that what I think we need to do is strengthen business development and strengthen leadership development in the field. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we've been working on at UMass Boston to try to test some innovative models for doing this. So the first one is entrepreneurial leadership training.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We need you to slow down for the...
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
We're not laughing at you, Marie. We're happy to see you. No, we're happy to see you. We're speaking too quickly.
I'm talking too fast, Marie.
Yes, okay. Yes. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so two solutions, entrepreneurial leadership development and business supports and leadership development. So when it comes to entrepreneurial leadership development, we have launched several different initiatives to support and strengthen and stabilize small businesses in the early care and education space. One of those initiatives is a Small Business Innovation Center. It was started in partnership with Marie when she was at Bessie Tart Wilson Initiative for Children, and now it's at UMass Boston. And what we found is that we've had several cohorts of business owners go through this program, learn basic business skills, get some business coaching, and in a relatively short period of time, what we found is that small business owners were able to take a look at their budget and identify ways that they could strengthen kind of the financial bottom line of their business. And what it did is it freed up money that they could use to give bonuses to their staff, that they could hire an assistant to work with the children, so they increased the ratio of adults to children, and they could invest in quality in really concrete ways like that. What that does is it stabilizes the day-to-day operations, it keeps the business open. Many of them learned about marketing strategies, and they were able to fill empty spots they had in their child care programs, so they served more children and families, and they were able to then begin to focus on quality enhancements. So this is, I think, a really, really important part of what needs to happen when it comes to supporting the workforce and understanding that this really is a small business sector. The second thing is leadership training. So one of the things that we started doing several years ago is with a grant from Massachusetts Race to the Top, Early Learning Challenge Fund, we launched a leadership development program that was our postmaster certificate program. And what it did was recruited teachers from the field and engaged them in a one-year-long leadership development program where they really focused on gaining a sense of themselves as leaders and also gaining a set of skills for being drivers of change. And For those of you who think about women's leadership development, you wouldn't be surprised that almost every educator, we've had 60 people go through this program before, almost every single one of those teachers came into the program and said, I've never thought of myself as a leader. And when they walk out of that program, they are absolutely transformed. They realize that they have a contribution to make, that there's ways that they can take charge and drive change. They've built confidence, and as one teacher said, who knows, maybe our directors group can contribute to a movement that helps us lead change rather than one that helps others to tolerate it. So what she did is she started to see change isn't something we just try, that comes from somewhere else and that we just try to tolerate. Change is something that we can own and we can be the drivers of that change. So what we saw happen with this program, not slowing down, sorry, is really mobilizing this passion and commitment and expertise from within the field, retaining experienced educators, and supporting them to really be the drivers of change, working in their programs to enhance quality. Some of them started up entrepreneurial new programs like a Montessori Center and a STEM-based preschool program. So they've done really entrepreneurial things. They've led innovations in their own programs and taken on new jobs. In those cases, they were able to actually increase their salary, which is a big issue in the field when it comes to compensation. We've now extended that leadership curriculum into all of the programs that we have, both at the undergraduate level, where we serve almost 300 early educators who work in Boston's childcare centers, who are coming back to get their bachelor's degree. So that we have many pathways where educators can access leadership development and business development supports. So I wanted to just offer a few examples of, I think, where we need to be heading and focusing our attention, both on those gaps, but again, just to reiterate my initial point, that we cannot wait until children are 4. Pre-K is too late, and what's happening is that's eroding the strength and the attention that's needed on the birth to 4 childcare sector. So I think that's a really important focus, and I'm thrilled that you're hosting this series of meetings and really taking the lead on this issue, because it's really about time.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you mind staying there?
Sure.
Do you guys just want to do everyone or one at a time? Okay, right. So we're just going to, if you don't mind. I'll start, but I'm going to err towards brevity because I know my colleagues have time constraints. So I want to make sure they get some questions in. So could you speak to the average lifespan, if you will, of a community-based provider? Sort of looking for statistics, if you can offer any, relative to turnover in workforce, and also the average years of operating for a community-based.
Well, the average years of operating is a really interesting question, and I have never seen any data, comprehensive data about that. But I will look into that, and I will be in touch.
Okay.
So that's a great question.
Okay. And then can you speak to generally how many people they employ? And then how stable is that workforce? Because given the wage issue, the compensation issues, benefits, and the like, I would expect that there's likely a high turnover.
Right. There has historically been a high turnover, about 30%, both locally and just nationally. What's kind of interesting and is puzzling researchers right now is that we've seen that turnover really, really shrink. And I don't know if it's still fallout from the recession, but the turnover rate nationally has fallen to 11% in childcare. So really cut by 2/3. So I don't know. I haven't seen any local data. It's one of the gaps is that we don't really have a good ongoing source of data and statistics about the childcare workforce.
That was my
in the
next
city.
question, because given the legislation on the state level and the focus on the state level to address the needs of these small business operators and this workforce. And we're so encouraged by the laser focus of attention that now the industry and the workforce are getting. How are you working with them? And do we need more data to inform strategies and where investments should be made? And what would that look like? Is there a cost attributed to that? What would be sort of the entity to collect the data? Right. What do we need to do the data collection effectively?
About 1 to 2 years ago, there was an effort, and I was part of a advisory group that was looking at, funded partly by BAR, and United Way was involved, to look at creating an early childhood data center in the city of Boston. And it was a planning initiative, and as I remember it, there really wasn't a sense that there was funding that was going to be coming forward to support that effort. And so it's really a gap. We did engage with the Department of Early Education and Care at the state level because they have a workforce registry, and they also track licensed programs. The reason we ended up trying to pursue a Boston data center is that EEC told us they have zero capacity now, nor do they ever anticipate in the future capacity to actually use that PQR, that Professional Qualifications Registry, to generate this kind of the data that would be useful to us at the city level. To be able to provide that. Whether that's changed, I don't know. That was about 2 years ago, but it.
Well, to your, I know when we were just, sort of introduced to this subject matter by Marie St. Fleur several years ago, and started working with her and, forming sort of an informal working group to inform our advocacy in this space. We had on our own tried to do mapping just to get a sense of how many community-based providers they are, and it was impossible. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding clearly. So currently there is no registry or inventory for the city of Boston, a mapping of where, because if we're concerned about access and equity, it would seem that's a good place to start.
So there's two different sources of data. One is the workforce data, and that's really held at the state level. And the only way to get that, unless we recreate it in the city of Boston and do our own registry, is to get it through EEC. And they'll make the data available, but then you need some funds to support the analysis of it so it can be used in reporting. In terms of data for childcare centers, licensed childcare centers, there is. That is available through EEC's website. It's a cumbersome process, but you can, and we recently did, as part of our efforts to understand the businesses in the city, we accessed all the licensed programs. This was probably in February we pulled it. So we pulled all the licensed programs in the city of Boston, and the information that's available is the license capacity by age group, basic contact information, the zip code where it's located.
So can you quantify how many? Do you have a recollection?
Yeah, so there was roughly 200 licensed childcare centers in the city of Boston. About half of them are small, meaning they serve fewer than about 49 kids.
Okay.
And half are more than 50 kids.
And are there rules, or rather I know there are, but could you just share with us how many providers have to exist? What's the child to provider ratio?
So for infants, it's generally 1 to 3, so 1 adult for 3 infants. That's why infant care is expensive. You need a lot of adults when it comes to caring for babies. Toddlers, it's roughly 1 to 4, 1 to 5, depending on the group size.
Okay.
And then for preschoolers, it's 1 to 10.
Okay.
Generally speaking, depending on the setting. So, so again, you can see it's one way that businesses stay afloat is they have preschool classrooms that are hopefully fully enrolled, because those provide a lot more financial revenue than the infant and toddler classrooms that are just incredibly expensive to operate, which is why there's such a shortage.
Okay. Is it possible to quantify what percentage of these community-based facilities are in residential homes? Through our informal working group, we learned, given growth in the city, gentrification, displacement, eviction is happening. We're doing everything we can to stem that, especially when they are unjust. But were it not for that working group, we would not have learned and would not now be working on how do we think about different approaches, because many of these facilities are in homes, and so when the property is purchased or when there is an eviction, you are not only disrupting and destabilizing that family, but childcare. So is it possible to quantify what percentage of these community-based providers are in residential homes?
I think it's fair to say that the family childcare are all in homes, and the center-based are probably mostly not in homes, although it's not impossible. But so I would say that the 200 licensed childcare centers are probably not in residential homes by and large, but the 400 plus family childcare businesses are all in homes.
Okay.
And so when we pulled these data in February, we found 400, roughly just a little over 400 licensed family childcare homes. I saw a similar statistic from about 3 years ago in the city that said there were 600. So it's possible there's discrepancies in data collection, or it's possible that we've lost 200 or so home-based providers.
Okay.
And there's certainly some anecdotal evidence to suggest that that is what's happening.
And so my last question for this round before turning it over to my colleagues is, I had the privilege of experiencing the graduation, the partnership with Bessie Tart Wilson and Madison Park. And it was incredible to see the self-agency and empowerment. And I need to be in some of those classes. They're managing their books perfectly, and learning to live within a budget, and that's helping them in so many other ways, and certainly supporting the development of our children. Now that it has been absorbed by UMass, which I concede is new information to me, how are we informing this industry and this workforce? How are they being made aware of this incredible resource?
So we have a number of staff and members of our leadership network who are based in community-based programs throughout the city of Boston, and we've been seeking funding to support continued
outreach.
Right.
Okay.
So we're doing outreach now for a similar but somewhat different program that targets slightly larger childcare businesses, and that's a new partnership that we're piloting with the Initiative for a Competitive Inner City with Steve Grossman.
Okay.
So we are piloting, he runs a business growth program,
Yes.
the ICCC program, and we're piloting a group of medium-sized childcare business owners and entrepreneurs with some additional early education supports in this cohort through his program. So this is a partnership that we're piloting. So
Okay.
we're doing that as well as the really small business program that we launched with the leadership of Bessie Tart Wilson.
Okay.
So that one, the Bessie Tart Wilson version now, as it's carried over to UMass, is a partnership with Tech Goes Home as well. And we are expecting to know that we've gotten funding for it by April, and then we'll be doing recruitment out in neighborhoods. We have a waiting list that we still have from people who had wanted to join a third
And what is the
cohort.
cost and the capacity of that?
The capacity is we will take up to 15 providers in that, and we're taking up to 10 in the ICCC program. And so relatively small cohorts really focused on building kind of that mutual support and learning opportunity.
And so you said you'll know in April if you have the funding, and how much is that? I'm just trying to get a sense of
How much
operating
does it
costs.
cost?
Yes.
Well, the funding that we asked for, we requested funding from Boston Foundation, for example, for that program, covers other things happening at the Institute, including our postmaster certificate program. So I could get some numbers for you just
Okay, just
for
trying to
the
get a sense.
small business innovation. Yeah, I could get you some
Okay.
numbers for that. what it
Excellent.
cost.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George.
I have a quick question. So just a quick question, because I think, when you experience accessing childcare, there's this desire to balance the desire to pay good wages to childcare providers and early ed providers, but also controlling the cost of childcare so that families can sort of justify going into the workforce or returning to the workforce, and then accessing childcare at a reasonable price. How do we come to terms with balancing those two desires?
Well, that is the big question. And one way.
I want an answer. I want to know how we get to that
One
sweet spot.
answer to that question is that there is a public investment. That it's not universal pre-K, it's universal childcare. That's what every other comparable industrial country has done, except the United States. Is that realistic? Do I think that's going to happen? Unfortunately, no. But that is the solution. What other solutions there are? One of the things we're doing with our small business cohorts is we're engaging them in some kind of innovation convenings to really think about how might we redesign the childcare business model in the first place. Are there things that we can do, bringing people from different sectors together to say, whether it's engaging other business partners or other funding entities. So I think that there's probably room for some innovation and some new thinking going into this, but it's it's a very big challenge. And without public funds, it will make it hard.
Unfortunately, I think that's the answer, and we need to figure out a way to get there. Thank you. That's it for me.
Counselor Kim?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Counselor Presley. First of all, thank you for all of this information. It was very insightful. Just one quick point of clarification. So when you cited the numbers, the demographics for the folks of who runs the facilities, what was the percentage for blacks? You had 30% for Hispanic, 24?
25%.
25%.
25% African American and black.
Okay.
And those are the categories that the state collects. So this ultimately came from the state's professional qualifications registry, which has over 90,000 people in it right now.
Right, okay. So, well, I'm just going to be very candid. You know, it's always a point of frustration when we know the need exists. We know the incredible work that folks have been doing for, forget years, decades. And when you ask that question, you know, what is the city doing before the age of 4? While I definitely applaud the mayor's efforts for 4-year-olds and the work of Councilor Presley, of course, and many others who have been pushing for investment in this space, what do you think are the barriers to getting to the larger question of not only what the state can do in terms of this issue, but what the city can do? Because part of it, I think, is money, but there are other barriers. Sometimes it's just folks don't want to challenge the status quo. Sometimes folks don't want to take risks, don't want to pilot new things. Some folks don't want to step on the toes of other folks. I'd just be curious to know, as we think about what we can do together on the city level, what you envision some of the barriers are to making some of this stuff happen, and being candid with us about it.
I talk about this very issue with the educators who go through our various business development and training programs, and honestly, I think one of the really big things is the disrespect for the workforce and people's lack of understanding about what this sector is. It is very confusing. I think funders are scared of it. They don't get it. And it just seems messy and complicated, and there's so much talk about how uneducated the workforce is, or just a lot of deficit thinking about who this workforce is. There's so many misconceptions. They're so underpaid. And so I think people are afraid of it, and they feel the public school system feels safe. It's a thing. People, everyone knows what it is. Everybody's been to school and that kind of thing. So one thing that I've been kind of trying to assess is whether talking about it as a small business sector explicitly helps people, because a lot of people can understand small business sectors. There are other industries that are primarily small business sectors, and there are certain things that those sectors have that help them be viable, and one of them is a leadership and innovation ecosystem. So if we built an ecosystem like that to support this workforce. The other thing is, people do not believe, and I am convinced of this, by and large, people do not believe that early educators can be leaders. They don't think they're smart, and they don't think they're capable of being the drivers of change. They think they need to be told what to do, and I think that's wrong. And one of the things that I've seen change people's mind is when they hear from early educators who've gone through some kind of leadership training or been a part of a cohort where they really gained the confidence to speak up as a leader. They were already leaders in the work they did, but to speak up about it, it changes people's mind. People's jaws drop. They're shocked. They can't believe that these women are capable of being so strong and so passionate and having so many ideas about how to solve the problems they face every day.
But yet we trust them with our children?
That's the paradox.
Right, yep, right.
Okay.
Yep.
I know.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. No, that's very, yep.
So, all right.
No, that's extremely helpful. That's extremely helpful, and sort of, especially the bigger picture, because when you begin to answer that question, what the city can do before the age of 4, there's obviously a whole host of things. But in order to get the city and everyone on the same page as to what is necessary and have the same mindset about change and innovation and creation and support for these small businesses, it's really great to think about that sort of approach.
Right, I think it is a mindset shift. And
Yeah.
I think it's showing people that that this is possible because they don't believe it is until they see it, and then they do. So one of the things we do with the programs that we're piloting is to really try to elevate that leadership and make it visible.
Outside of the support for leadership development of existing providers or those who want to enter that industry, and outside of, you name the gaps, sort
The
of
business?
looking at them as businesses and how we support the restaurant business or anything else, they should have the same access to those opportunities. Of course, catering it to this type of industry and expertise and everything else. On just sort of going to a little bit more of the granular, so what would you like to see in an ideal world in the city of Boston when it comes to what we can offer before the age of 4? What would you like to see that look like outside of supporting the businesses themselves, supporting the development and leadership, and expanding the leadership capacity of those who are serving in these roles as directors and those who serve with them, of course? What would you think is the best, sort of the ideal? If you could get everything you wanted today, what would that look like? And what would the offerings be within the city of Boston? I forget the state level, but just within the city of Boston, what would that look like?
Do you mean in terms of workforce support specifically, or the whole
No,
system?
in the system. So, I'm about to have a baby. What would that?
I'm not, I'm just thick.
I'm really about to have a baby, but
They're both pregnant.
I couldn't let that one go. I really tried to let that one go and just pass on by. For those folks who are about to have children, or another one, and are looking for, we think about it like you said in the school context.
Right.
Ideally, the goal for every parent is a process that is user-friendly, where they can navigate and know in advance, I have a quality choice from K1 to the 12th grade, and maybe more than one, that is within my community that my kid can go to and get a quality education at every single level. That doesn't exist right now, so we're working on that. Before age 4, what would that look like for a parent, for a family? What would be available to them, or should be available to them, for them to get what you think is the ideal for any child in the city of Boston?
I think the biggest challenge for parents with a baby who are working, for parents of infants and toddlers in particular, is that the supply is limited. It is hard to find childcare, licensed childcare, either home-based or center-based, for infants and toddlers. So, and many families want a provider who speaks their language, serves the food that they eat at home, is someone they can feel comfortable and trust, maybe someone in their neighborhood or somewhere near where they work. Parents really want those kinds of environments by and large. And there are surveys to back this up, to show what kinds of settings parents want for their kids. They want their child to be loved and safe, and they want to be able to communicate on a regular basis with the person in a language they're comfortable with. So to me, what that means is we need to really support and strengthen the family child care system in the city of Boston, really support those providers. A lot of times when people talk about family child care, people say, oh, what about quality? They start getting worried. Well, you know what? Some of the most phenomenal quality I have ever seen has been in family child care homes.
And so that's a really great point. So at a bare minimum, it's if you have a child 0 to 3, and that's what you want, a location or a place for them to go to where it's a licensed child care provider that provides quality care for your kid, that I assume is affordable, convenient, proximate to where you live, a loving environment, academics, all of that in it. But the bare minimum is a place that is of high quality and of reasonable cost you can bring your child to from 0 to 3.
Right. And to make that possible, there have to be some kind of public subsidies. It is
Absolutely.
Infant toddler care is too
so
expensive.
it's not only supporting those who currently do it, and frankly who do it well, making sure how do we expand them, and those frankly who may not be doing it well, how do we say go somewhere else?
Right.
But how do we expand those who are currently doing the work, and then how do we create leaders to bring about new folks to meet that demand? And then how do we as a city partner with them with funding, with leadership skills, or whatever it is? That's very helpful. And then lastly, so when I get to mine, we were talking about the mapping a little bit. I'm going to be looking just at my district and looking at how we can map some of these. And EEC does have some data that might help us place it on a map within my district. But really wanting to peel back the layers to see if they're looking at where the locations are. So in certain neighborhoods, are there more locations, and are they deemed to be higher quality? And does that neighborhood look more affluent in the district, more white? What is it, right? Trying to create a story. But one thing is, it's so easy to drive by a place and assume that because it looks maybe a certain way, that the quality isn't there. Until you go in and then you see the quality is not only excellent, that the demand, these folks have waiting lists. These folks have had waiting lists. So it's really peeling back the layers of us, of going into these facilities, not simply looking at a storefront and all of that, or looking at who runs it, suspending our own biases to step into these places. So this was,
to your point, though, treating it like any other small business
Absolutely.
or startup, in the same way that our main streets provide technical assistance,
storefront, uplift, all that.
Around facade and things that,
We could be doing the same thing.
That about this industry as well.
No, this is very helpful. Thank you so much. And I apologize in advance for having to leave early. I will I will view the rest of the recording. But thank you for all you do. And Councilor Presley, thank you again for all you're doing. No, of course, thank you.
Councilor Wu?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I wonder if you could, and this is tricky because you said the data is so difficult. Are there categories that you would divide community-based providers into? For example, home-based or family providers, nonprofit versus profit, faith-based, some of the larger I'm just wondering, of those in Boston, for example, you said about half are 50 kids or fewer, but what other classifications are there?
So there are kind of the ownership status of the program is one of the, I think, main differences in the sector. So there are childcare centers that are part of nonprofit agencies. There are Head Starts that operate out of Head Start and ABCD. There are, of course, the home-based providers. There are standalone childcare centers that are owned and operated by an individual, so a business. There are some, of course, school-based classrooms as well. So whether a childcare center is part of a larger agency matters a lot, because if you're part of a larger agency, you may have a greater infrastructure and supports and those kinds of things. For example, with the Intercity Capital Connections program that we're forming this cohort for, we're looking for medium-sized childcare centers that are standalone, that have an owner-operator. And we've been able to find maybe 25 who serve 50 or more children that are standalone owned childcare businesses. There are many that are part of nonprofits in the city.
And how does the cost balance out if, for example, you're part of a larger agency and therefore you have access to more resources or infrastructure, but then if you're home-based, maybe on the rent side, you're not paying for commercial rent, for example. What is your advice to someone who is just thinking about the idea of starting a center but not sure which ownership status to pursue or situation to pursue?
I mean, many people start out as home-based family child care providers and decide they want to expand. So I think that sometimes the people who are running the standalone centers may have started out as family child care. It's not really great data, it's more anecdotal that some people are doing that. Some people may really just go in and start up a center in the first place. And there's a number of those long-time standalone centers in the city. But many of them, like I said, are operated out of nonprofits as one of many different programs that a nonprofit runs. So that probably attracts a different person, someone who's going to be a manager as opposed to an entrepreneur who wants to go out and start up their own business.
Okay. And it just seems, as we're thinking about supply and demand, there's such a disconnect when we know the cost of childcare to families is incredibly high in Massachusetts, and there are wait lists, and the demand seems to be there, but then those providers that are already in the business, you think about a different, analogizing this to a different sector of the economy, those providers who are working in a very highly, business with high demand, you'd think that the salaries would be comparably higher, that they'd be able to set their own terms. So why the disconnect?
It's largely because it's expensive business to do direct human service work of any kind. Imagine what it would cost us if parents paid for their child's public school education. Do you know how expensive those teachers are? They cost 3 times what they cost in childcare. Then you've got these expensive principals and assistant principals and all this infrastructure and building. All those things cost a lot of money. It would cost unimaginable and unaffordable sums if we expected parents to pay for K-12 education. And so I think the problem is that we're expecting parents to pay for it, and people cannot pay for that on the salaries that they make. And the subsidy for people who are able to access child care subsidies does not pay the full cost. It pays a fraction. So the government is subsidizing it at a rate that's below what it costs to provide the service. So does that make any business sense? So in effect, the child care providers themselves are subsidizing it. So our low-income workforce is subsidizing the child care for the city of Boston.
We touched upon this a little bit in the last briefing about the subsidies, but can you just go into one more level of detail? The subsidies follow the family, essentially, right, rather than the center.
Right, so a family qualifies to get a child care subsidy, and they can use it at a child care center that they choose. They could go to a family child care home or a center-based program.
And do you have a sense of what the supply-demand mismatch is in terms of wait lists versus, number of desired slots versus current slots?
I mean, there's always a intolerable wait list when it comes to subsidies. So families who qualify but cannot get the subsidy because the wait list is so long. Just straight up demand, if you're out there paying on the marketplace for childcare, you can almost always in the city of Boston find a spot for a 3 to 5-year-old child. It is hard to find a space for a child in the infant and toddler years. How hard, I don't know. I can't quantify it. It may be that's data I could get from somewhere, and I could look into it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Marie St. Fleur of St. Fleur Communications. Marie is no stranger to anyone in this room. She's a former state representative. She has extensive knowledge of this topic from her many roles, and I'm going to celebrate them all. She was the chair of the Education Committee. She led the establishment of the Department of Early Education and Care. She was vice chair of Ways and Means, focusing on education. And for the city of Boston, she was the chief of strategic investments. She is a CEO of a nonprofit focused on grassroots outreach on early education and care that resulted in the creation of the Put Mass Kids First Coalition and the Early Education and Care Small Business Innovation Center, which you've heard us reference and celebrate at Madison Park High School. Marie, thank you for joining us. You have worn many, many hats. Yeah. And we look forward to having the full benefit of your expertise and counsel about challenges and solutions.
Challenges and solutions. Well, thank you, Councilor Presley and Councilor Wu. Had I realized, I forgot that you were expecting, because you know what? This is why I do it. I always say we got to keep it in perspective. Policy is meaningless unless we focus on why we do it. And so I thought I brought my own prop, because you can talk numbers and you can talk all of that. We could talk about what we can afford to do or what not afford to do. But at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a life. And if we don't get it started right, that life is going to be interrupted needlessly in many ways. So I just want to always like to keep us focused. And so these are my 3 munchkins. We're now some of you probably knew them when they were running around, but they're much older than that. They're like 20-something and all. But
They've
I like
aged, but you
they've
haven't.
aged. All right, thank you. I thank you. So I'm going to go through a couple of things real quickly. So this actually, and for me, the most important title that I wear is mom. And they actually got me involved in this because I had such a challenge trying to find, and anybody who's known me, and I look out and I see all these wonderful women that I've connected with over the years and who were in the class with us, but I had such a challenge trying to find quality care. And I would think that Counselor Wu knows what I'm talking about, as you know, particularly if you're a working woman and your schedule is so crazy. And I mean, I had 3. They were like 2 years apart, went through that boom, boom, boom thing, let's get it done. But let me tell you, it's quite an experience when it's happening and trying to find quality care, particularly when they're infants and you're scared to death. Because you have to trust your child as much as you respect the person you're leaving them with, and you've done all the research that you can do. You know what it's like, particularly when it's your first, and it's the first time you're leaving them. It's the most gut-wrenching thing that you do. So I don't understand why we don't take this more seriously and pay people who do this a living wage. And so there were a number of questions that were asked, but I'm going to address a couple of things, and so that the block of things that I really want to talk about. Why, as we talk about Boston particularly, and then probably expand it a little bit, but one, why public-private partnership is something we should not let go, and that we should continue to hold on to and get everybody to define more clearly and integrated in every aspect of every policy that comes out of the city of Boston. 2, that we need to be careful that we are not reinventing or recreating inequities, because by creating the funding system that we have, if we don't do it well, we are bound to repeat segregation of kids. And nowhere is it acceptable. It's not acceptable in housing. It's not acceptable in education anywhere else. I'm not certain why we think it's acceptable in this instance here. And the third piece that I want to talk about is the workforce and the professionalization of the workforce as it relates to equity. Because while we are pushing for greater professionalization, we need to think about the gifts that we currently have in the classrooms that we have right now, and the importance of us maintaining some of the richness that we have in the classrooms right now. And infused for all of that, I want to beg you all for transparency. And the transparency for the system, transparency for parents. And so that's sort of where I am. And I know that Ann, who was on the board for the nonprofit that I chaired, and who I've known has done amazing work on with Project Hope and others. I was happy to hear her remarks, and I know she started to talk about the segments, but this is how I categorize the segments and how I think of them. We have a really diverse populations of folks, or segments of care in the city of Boston and across the state, and that is why it's so complicated. The complication was not created by the women. It was created by the folks who decided to fund this. Because if you recall, after World War II, we had totally full early education and care was funded. We got into early education and care in order to help women go back to work, to help women work during World War II. I mean, that's why it got started, and then it got stuck in that model, wrapped around work, and never around the child. And so part of what we're trying to do right now is shift a system to get it to wrap itself around the child. And okay? So what grew out of that? Because in government, we never tend to go back and clean up what we've done. We just build stuff on it, right? And then we try to figure out, how to clear up the mess as we go, but we don't necessarily take the time to clear out regulations, to clear out old policies. We just create sort of new ones. So you have the center-based care that you've heard, and there's small and there's large centers, right? And those large centers are often found at the Y, Boys and Girls Club, Catholic Charities, and a host of other places. That's where you're going to find a lot of your large centers, okay? And then you're going to find the family programs. And those family programs, many of them are independent. So there's these independent programs, and there's some of them that are connected to a network. That network could be ABCD, it could be connected to Nurtury, it could be connected to JPNDC, because there's somebody that's helping them, whether now it's reduced in my mind to simply reducing them with the management of the vouchers. But years ago, it used to really be supportive of the family engagement, as well as the professional development and a host of other things. But that has shifted a lot in my mind, and so we need to take a look at that. And then there's Head Start, which is often sort of put up as the gold standard, but it's got its challenges, right? And not everybody gets a chance to have the privilege of being in a Head Start classroom. And then you have religious programs that have come out of religious institutions. So 12th Baptist has programs, like I said, Catholic Charities. Now the Catholic schools are looking into programs. So you have them, and they're exempt, right? And so there's exempt and non-exempt programs, which creates a host of other problems. And then you have the for-profits. You know, when I got tired of looking, honestly, I went to a for-profit, Bright Horizons at the time, that opened up a new branch in Chinatown, and that's where my first kid ended up going. And it's all expensive. They're having trouble too. So I want you to put that in the parking lot, because they're having difficulty finding educators who can serve their children. So there's a huge problem here around the workforce. And then now you have the public schools. And so, which adds another wrinkle. And so that wrinkle is exciting, but it also then, every time you pull one way, you create a problem another way. All right? And so I say, as you look at this, the thing that we bring to this, we say that it's all our children, right? They're all our children. Whether we find them from infants for all the way down to whether they're 4 or 5, they're ours, and we have to figure out how do we support them. And so we can't pretend they're not there until they show up. And so as I think about this, we have to figure out how, in doing this in Boston, we don't undermine what happens for young children, the youngest among us. You asked Ann the question, well, what would you want to see? Well, I'd like us to really look at what we have, because sometimes it's not about what we need to go do. It's about what we have. We have amazing networks in Boston right now that really works, whether it's the newborn baby visits. There's all these programs that I'm sure Dr. Boynton Jarrett is going to talk to you about, and Sherry Kraft is going to talk to you about. They exist. We need to figure out how we work them and engage them more in the infant world to support families, because kids don't live alone. We need to support families, particularly at that youngest age. And then the important thing that has to happen at that stage is the whole parental support. You know, I had a mom, I could pick up the phone. She used to, and I'd call her at midnight, because when that kid starts screaming and you have no idea what's going on with her, you need somebody to help you, to tell you what to do. Whether or not, and one day I did, I gave her peas. I didn't know peas was going to cause gas, and I didn't know. And so she's screaming, before she went to bed, she's screaming, and I have no idea what to do with that child. But you know what I mean? So if I'm a mom and I'm by myself and I'm panicked and I don't have somebody else to talk to, it sounds trivial, but at that time, that's the most important thing going on in your life. And you need to figure out how to get some help for that. We need to give parents some support, and we need to empower parents. We have taken away parental responsibility in so many ways. Rather than figuring out how we support parents, we tell them to get out the way, let's get in and let's do it for you. We need to figure out ways how to empower parents back again, to allow them to do what they need to do so they can support their families in the way they need to do it. And so as government, as federal, state, and municipal, you have to make the opportunity to make certain that all segments work for children and families. The standards that are put in place, the safety regulations, the education, curriculums and assessments, the environmental pieces, and then you need to look at the resources, whether or not those resources are meeting all of that, and does it make sense, okay? And then you need to take a look at the capacity. So at the capacity, one of the things I'm praying that Boston does is really do a capacity assessment of the programs that you have right now in the city of Boston. Because if you don't do that, you'll never know the strengths of any of them. And that has to do with the spaces that you have, that has to do with the educators, what strengths and weaknesses, where do they need support, and how do we direct the money appropriately. Because if you're going to have a public-private partnership, you can't assume that the people who are in that community setting are ready to jump in. And you need to have real conversations with them. And the community setting needs to be open. Because the community setting have gotten so, when you're punched all the time, you become very protective. And so you don't want to hear anybody telling you the wrong things that you're doing. I'm here to say community setting, it's about the kids. You need to open yourself up a little bit more and become a little bit more vulnerable so that we can hear some of the challenges, so that we can give you the support you need, so that we can meet each other in the right way. All right? So that we can get this done right. Because our kids are going to suffer if we don't do it right. So there's trouble. But there's great things happening in those community settings, too. So I don't like when we talk about how terrible it is. It ain't that terrible because they're the only ones who've been doing it. Public schools weren't there all this time. These community settings have been doing it. So we need to honor them and support them and give them the resources that they need. And at the same time, they need to become more transparent in how they manage their business. So we can make certain the resources are going where they need to go, and that is for the children. And so when I talk about capacity, you're looking at facilities, space. You're looking at how you support educators. You're looking at how they're looking at curriculum. And you're looking at what type of assessments that they have. Most of that is already in place. The public schools have their own program that they want the community settings to adopt. And if we want them to adopt it, then we need to know that you've got to meet them where they are to help them grow to that place. And by the way, at the same time, the public schools need to understand they're not great at nurturing. They're not great at care. And so if that's the case, then they need to really learn from the folks who have been doing the nurturing and the caring and take some of those examples from them. And so they all have something to learn from each other. Bottom line, if we want a real public-private partnership, then you can't say, okay, I'm public school, I'm going to have a feeder program, so I know that if I go to if I go into the Mathers for pre-K, that automatically I know I'm going to have a seat at the Mathers, or I might have a seat at the Edward Everett. I know that that's going to happen for me. But if I happen to go to a community setting, I have no idea where I'm going. And if that's the case, then guess what? I am not going to I'm actually going to really push for that public school setting, right? And I'm going to strip the community setting. But I promise you, if you all go look at the numbers right now, it's going to be the parent who is the most capable. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It's the parent who knows how to work the system is going to be the one who's going to get into those pre-K classrooms. And I promise you right now, I don't have the data, I'm offering off my gut. I ask you guys to go look at the data right now and take a look at who's in your pre-K schools seats right now. And I beg you to do that, not as a way of hitting people over the head, but as a way of understanding the problem so that we can make certain that that feeder system is in place sooner than later so that everybody gets a shot at it. Otherwise, I'd do what we used to do when my kids were growing up, right? So you take your kid into a private school, right? You get them all ready, and at the point that they're really good ready in the private or independent school, now you go have them get ready for the ISEE. They take the ISEE because you know where I want her to be or him to be? I want him to be at Boston Latin School. So as soon as they're done, I move them into Boston Latin because now I don't want to pay the tuition anymore because I'm paying $25,000 for them to be in that independent school. And hey, Latin is cheap and I'm getting a top-notch education. I'm not saying anything out of school. Those are just the realities. And our kids need to have a level playing field. It's about equity. And if we're going to do that, then that feeder system has to be put in place sooner rather than later. So that's the other piece. And so then I think about, early education, the quality of it is depending upon the program and the money. No money, it's tough to get good quality. I mean, you get what you pay for. Everybody used to say that all the time. I think that still applies in a lot of ways. But in this instance, I also think it's false because you're getting more than you're actually paying for. And it's the women who are doing this job who's absorbing the deficit. They're absorbing the deficit with their quality of life, with their families. They're the ones absorbing it. And we need to think about that in reality. And I see some of them in the room today. 92% of our money for this state of Massachusetts for early education and care comes from the federal government. So that's a huge dip given what's happening around the world, you know, in our life right now, right? And so we really need to think about what funding, it's not something, an exercise that we could just sort of lightly think about. We really need to dig in and figure out if there should be a shift, what that's going to look like for our children, because they're going to be impacted. And so if 92%, Massachusetts only puts in about 550 million, I think, is the budget for Department of Early Education and Care. And we bring in, I mean, when I say in terms of the state, bring into that conversation about 8-9%. I don't think it's been much more than that. Over a 12-year period, we had a deficit. We really did not invest in early ed in Massachusetts, which resulted in, you know, really $100 million, some would say $112 million being taken out of the system. Because when you level fund without taking into consideration inflation, then you actually, because, you know, the price of all your overheads has not changed. But you're still getting paid the same amount of money. And so that's where they found themselves. And so the women have borne the cost of that. And so we really need to all be advocating together for greater investment in early education and asking the state to play a greater role in that investment in putting in resources for early education and care in Massachusetts. The subsidy system is not sustainable. I mean, we can pretend that it is. And every year we go and we hunt for a little bit more. But it's not sustainable because the model is not sustainable. And so that goes back to this whole idea that I talked to you about around the segregation of students. And people cringe when I say it, but this is what it's about. It's not that because if you're poor, that putting you in a classroom is a bad idea. Poor kids in a classroom is a bad idea. I think diversity, if we say diversity is a strength, then we need to bring all people into a classroom together so they could learn together and create a more enriched environment. Allow me as a parent who may not know to actually watch somebody model something else. I'm on the board of the Boys and Girls Club in Dorchester. We had all sorts of parents that come in. But imagine when Linda comes in, Senator Dorsina, comes in running like trying to figure out, because she's running late or whatever. And then, another parent who might have had another reaction, now understands that everybody's going through that. And they see how she models, saying, I'm so sorry. And, and they get to see it. Because sometimes modeling behavior matters. It's not what you say, it's what you do, right? And you get to do that. And the other thing is the other child. That child who's in that classroom with that other kid gets to have another experience as well. And they become friends. And we get to learn and love and care about each other. So we don't have the kind of America that we're now growing. So we all have that opportunity to do that. So that's that on the human side. That's why it's important. But on an important side as well is the fact that now you can begin to think of a model that actually is not totally dependent on state funding. Because you now have an opportunity to bring parents in who can pay a little bit more. And so the idea of a sliding scale that could supplement or support that, you have a more room. It gives more room. But you have to create that opportunity. And if I'm a parent, I want quality, then I want to make certain that it's not about who's in the classroom. I want to make certain where I'm dropping off my kid is the place that I'm going to be comfortable in. So that is why this whole conversation around quality and creating the right kind of environment and space is so important. And I'm so glad you women are taking such lead on it. So for me, you have to infuse all of that throughout your policy. You have to infuse, because if you're not intentional about it, it's like when people talk about if you want to grow the number of people of color you have, you don't wait till the end of the process and say, okay, really? No, it's got to be part of the culture of what you're doing, right? And you need to infuse it throughout your process so that at the end of the day you end up with a pool of people that would be reflective of what you're looking for. Not at the end of the day you wake up and you hadn't done what you were supposed to do. Now you're chasing around trying to figure out how you find somebody. That's not really being, anyway. So that's that. And then finally, so we talked about Public-private partnership, we talked about within that the importance of capacity, the need for the feeder, and then why it's important that we have a mixed deliveries, mixed delivery, but as well as mixed, very diverse pool of children to work with. And then finally, the workforce. You can't have quality without a good workforce. I don't know any business that operates without a good workforce. And we have spent a lot of money in Massachusetts to invest to try to increase the number of educators with at least some early education and care degree, whatever it comes in. Some folks have gotten it in various things, but they've gotten a degree to help them, and to help them understand and better support children. Now that we've done that and we have them in the community settings, we hit community settings over the head telling them they had to do this, right? Now that we've done that, the public school system is coming in. And by the way, I'm not against it. Actually, it's not a bad thing. So I don't want anybody to say Marie said it was bad. It's not bad, people. It's not bad, but we have to do it well. We have to do it well. And so when you come in and everybody's getting paid between $21,000 and $25,000 a year for the most part on average in a community setting, and then you have a school, a system that says I can get you starting at $40,000. Well, honey, what do you think folks are going to do? And I'm not stupid. I tell my kid in a minute, because I've got college loans to pay, to go, because that's what they ought to do. So it's not telling people not to go and grow, but it's making certain that we actually are paying people in that community setting a living wage. And so therefore, some of us are going to have to give some pain and do something uncomfortable in order to get those wages lifted up. Because we could play around with it all at once. At the end of the day, it's about resources, and it's not going to fall from the sky. We're going to have to make some tough decisions. So that's one. So the professional development is good. And, I don't know anything about it, but I know Ann could tell you all about it. And there's plenty of folks who are doing it, and they've been able to do it well. What I do know in the city of Boston and most of this state is disjointed, okay? And everybody's doing it, and there's no real collective way of understanding. I have folks in this room right now who can tell me that they would go for training, to look for the training in order to meet whatever the QRS requirement is. First, they got to pay it out of their own pocket, and they're not making enough. Two,
How much is that?
I don't know. You guys are here. You can tell how much it's sometimes.
Some courses cost 75, some cost 100, 50, it varies.
And they have to drive sometimes out to Framingham or parts unknown to be able to get the coursework. We are in the city of Boston, really? I got to leave Mattapan in order to go to Framingham or wherever to get a class? That doesn't make any sense. We should be able to better coordinate and better support workforce development and professional development in this city, and we have the opportunity to do it. And I'm going to put a plug in. You have a center you're talking about opening up at the Mather School, right? You have all these non-profits, community programs there. Why aren't you using that as a place to really help that community programs and provide them the supports that they need? One-stop shopping, so that they're not running all around town, and then have a conversation about how it gets paid. If you guys are going to go up to the State House looking for money, ask how you pay for your folks to get the quality education that they deserve. That's one, in the professional development that they deserve. And secondly, what happens is, when we professionalize, it's another way sometimes of closing the door to others. It might not be intentional, but that's what happens. Because if your professional development model is based upon a traditional student, my kid now who's 21, 22, who's going through college, and that's what your program is based on, and I have a mom who doesn't speak English. I'm bilingual. I speak Haitian, but most folks are talking, when I say that, people are talking folks who speak Spanish. So when you do that, that person has not, does probably have her GED, probably has taken a bunch of certification classes from NAEYC or what have you. They probably have all these certificates sitting in a box somewhere, but it's never amounted to anything because they were never put together to drive towards credits. How unfair is that to this woman? And now you're saying to her, you don't have a degree, by the way, can't help you. And so she did the work. She was able to get the certificates. English is not her primary language. She's not really been in a formal school setting for the longest time. She has a family that she has to take care of. Besides taking care of all of our children, she has to come home and take care of her kids. And now we're saying to her, now you figure out the time amongst all of that to go get yourself a 4-year or 2-year degree without any real planned pathway or bridge to her or support to her. Have you all ever put a kid through college? You've ever done the college applications? You've ever done a FAFSA? Let me tell you, I have a law degree, it's an experience. And so to tell somebody to do that without the right support and no money is unfair. So those are the things that I think we need to think about. Bring it down to real people, real things that are happening to people, and perhaps we can move forward. And so if you don't do that, then I'm going to lose the cultural richness that we have in these programs across the city. People who come from different places, because I have a certain, whatever it is, I'm going to feel more comfortable leaving my infant with that person. Because I know what their home is like. I know what their upbringing is like. They speak my language. They get me. We're going to lose that. And by the way, it's poor for the kid too, because language is important. And even though they might not, end up speaking it along the way, when it's in your head, it comes back. It's the most amazing thing, and it's idiotic, but it does. And so then we are going in other places to bring people that speak other languages into this city. Yet we have the richness right here, and we're not cultivating it. And so with these teachers, we can do that, and we can do it the right way. And so finally, we want to preserve that, because that's who we are as Boston. We are multilingual, multi-ethnic, multiracial, and we should preserve that in every way, and it should be infused in every way. And finally, transparency. It's about the money. When we finish dealing with the kids and all we have to put around it, it's about the money. But I ask you to look at how we're spending what we have right now. Folks who know me, that's why I'm doing this in the name of St. Fleur Communications and nobody else's name, not speaking in the name of any organization. This is from my own experience. We have to look at what we have right now and figuring out how we're coordinating it, if we're coordinating it well, and if we're using it effectively, right? And then we do need to provide people additional. There need to be additional support, additional resources. But if you're just going to pile things on and not have any real idea, then I think it's going to be a challenge to sustain it. You're going to be building on an unsustainable model, and you're just going to be adding layers to it. So with that, and there's other states who figured out how to create pools of dollars. Wisconsin, Virginia, I think Pennsylvania have figured out how to create some pools of dollars in order to assist early education in their states. There's a certain state, I think, and Emily, you might remember, who actually was able to get the business community to collaborate with the state and really create this nice investment fund for early education and care. And with all the businesses that we have here in the city of Boston, we're growing. We have all these cranes up in the air. I mean, early education should be a focus in terms of how the money gets invested, because that's about our future and the future of the people who are living in these neighborhoods. So we should consider that as we look at how Boston can grow some money. And I'm happy to find those models to send over to you all so you all could look at. And the other thing, it's about the programs. The programs have to be more honest, honestly. It's about the kids. And so we have to be more honest about our strengths and weaknesses, because, you've already got yours. This is about these kids having the opportunity to get theirs, and that's everybody. And so we need to be more honest about it and do the best that we can. So I beg you to really work with the city. I know Ron, in terms of really figuring out how we fund, I don't know if they've done it already, this capacity planning piece, in order to really look at all the programs in the city and get a real assessment of where they are, not to hit people over the head with it, but in order to support them to move to where they need to be, not for them, but for the kids. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Don't leave us. You can keep the kids up. We like that. Okay.
Sorry.
No, but thank you for your comprehensive contribution here. As I said, you have worn many hats in this, and so on full display was that expertise. So we thank you. And a number of the questions that I had, you answered in your presentation. I was wondering about models that we could replicate, and so you answered that. You said Wisconsin, Virginia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I encourage you to look at Build Initiative, which is another one of my clients, and they have, they would have all of, they have a lot of the different states, the work that's being done across the country.
Okay.
And they have examples of all of the things that are happening, so your aides might wish to take a look at it and really get a sense of what's going on across the country. We
Okay,
were a
great.
leader, but we're falling behind.
And then legislatively, I know a great deal of your work has sort of been sort of the blueprint and laid the foundation for a lot of the discussions happening now on the state level. Our first policy briefing was about the accessibility of care for our homeless families, and we learned at that policy brief about some legislation that we should be lobbying and supportive on the state level. So is there anything on the state level that we should be aware of that you think supports the actualization of some of these larger goals and reforms?
So I'm not putting in, I think I'm going to say what they are. I know the Mass Association, MATCA folks, have a bill out. And it's not about endorsement or lobbying, but they do. It's worth looking at. The mayor has a bill out, has a bill in committee that he's filed, and so I think that is absolutely something that we need to look at. I know that the speaker is looking at developing, and we're waiting for his package to come out, and so he'll be doing a package on early ed as well. That speaks to the issue of workforce and quality. At the end of the day, unfortunately, early education, in all fairness, is because of the federal dollars, is really funded through the state. And there's very little money, independent dollars that come from the state to the cities, the municipalities, in order to help them fund early education. But I do think we need to look at, and I know, and Renee, thank you, will probably speak to that, you know, because, you know, you have other places, whether it's early intervention, public health. I mean, there are places that support children that we can look at as well, and seeing how those places, dollars are being used to support children. One of the legislators I would suggest, I'm concerned that we are creating a situation where, because programs are starving to sustain themselves, that early intervention dollars, you get a higher return, you get a higher rate, and so therefore you're getting classrooms with a lot of kids for early intervention. I'm going to tell you, that to me is a little scary, because if we are having the problems we're having with workforce, in terms of a skilled workforce, the person who works with that has to have certain skill sets. And so I am very concerned about that. And so we need to look into that and what that looks like in Boston, across the state, but what that looks like in Boston. And I will say what makes folks uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, it's the kids, guys.
That's right.
It's
And I
the
appreciate
kids.
your highlighting, even with the best of intentions and being innovative and comprehensive in some of these strategies and approaches, unintended consequences.
That's right.
And so I appreciate.
And I'm guilty.
So I
I'm
very,
guilty
very
of those
much
unintended
appreciate your
consequences.
highlighting those.
Yeah.
And we will check in on the status of that capacity assessment. I did just want to ask one question that. In that, you were talking about inequities and disparities, and we know that, a lack of quality care, can be an indicator and set our children on a pathway to so many other disparities. So, educational, economic, and also poor health outcomes. So I'm just curious for one of the segments of care. Is anyone aware of any models or relationships that exist with our healthcare centers? Because it just seems they are this sort of natural asset that exists in so many of our neighborhoods. So
I'm sure your panelists can respond to that when they come up.
Wasn't that a nice segue?
Yeah, I think so. I think they can absolutely respond to that.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm
there are
auditioning.
several.
You never ask
Very
a question
good.
you don't know the answer to. Okay.
Very good. Well,
Okay.
thank
Well,
you.
one second.
Oh.
Counselor.
Yeah, I'll just keep it short, 'cause I know we have other folks to hear from. So on the just thinking about our city and growing inequality and increasing segregation, how are we, I think moving towards the sliding scale models and trying to have incentives to honor diversity and recognize the strength of diversity in the other kids that are going to be there with your kid and parents, etc. But geographically, when the segregation is so clear and folks want to keep their kids either close to home or close to work, how do we get at that from the child care perspective?
But I happen to think, and if you look at, I always encourage you to get the BRA to give you a picture of what your district looked like in terms of income. You'd be very surprised. You'd be very surprised of the mix of incomes that sits in most neighborhoods in the city of Boston. Except that if you're at the top of that income chart for your neighborhood, you're going to take your kid where you think it's better. So it's not that they're not there, it's that we haven't yet figured out a way to let them know the programs that are really good so that they can keep them closer to home. And
I also appreciate your advising us to do a deep dive into who's accessing pre-K seats.
Yeah, you should.
I do think that will be very revealing.
Because, and it's not to knock, but it's to say we've got to get going on this community partnership piece and make it work and work well for all kids. And the other piece that I would ask, when we did this in the very beginning, when we were looking at Dudley, for the Dudley Small Business Innovation Center, and we had worked with the then BRA, now the Planning and Development Agency, because they can plot it for you. They can pull all of that information off the department's website, the EEC, and plot it for you, so you'll be able to see, and they'll be able to tell you how many slots they have, all of that. They can plot that for each of your neighborhoods, because we've had that. One of the beautiful things about that department, and I can't say enough about the chief researcher there, who's now I'm going to forget the name, right? He's going to kill me.
Alvaro.
But thank you. Alvaro's amazing. And, if you want to know how many kids with asthma and some of the work, they can give you that information. They can really bring it down. Domestic violence from public safety, they can give you all of that so you can get a good handle on what it is that you have in these neighborhoods. So in terms of the mixed income, I think it's possible because Boston, we're actually doing, we do have pockets of people that we haven't figured out how, and we should, it's not, anyway, with help. But for the most part, there are particularly young families who are young professionals who have moved into these communities and they're there, but then they will take their kids someplace else.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, such a wealth of knowledge here, and we're trying to do it all justice. Okay, and so I do think we're going to bring Renee up now. Actually, Renee, I'm sorry, I'm taking us out of order. I need Sherry Kraft. Apologize. And I'm just coming from a story hour in Dorchester, and we had a lot of babies from Smart from the Start that were at our Chill On Park story hour. You will be happy to know.
Did you see our cute little bookshelf?
Oh, listen, they were very attentive, and so great job.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I always tell my kids to raise a ruckus.
Well, let me tell you, when we announced pizza and ice cream, it was complete pandemonium.
Okay, there you go.
But while I was reading, they were rapt attention.
Oh,
so,
that's wonderful. Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I am a product of Boston. I was raised in a housing project not too far from here. Smart from the Start really is an opportunity for me to marry my personal passion for this work and my professional background in social work and in mental health counseling. And so for those of you who don't know much about our organization, we are a family and community-driven grassroots organization that has as our mission to eliminate to prevent the achievement gap instead of eliminating it. And the reason why our mission is to prevent the achievement gap is quite obvious, because obviously it's easier and much more cost-effective to prevent the achievement gap than it is to close it once it exists. But Smart from the Start is much more than an early education program. We are a holistic, ecological approach to really looking at how we prevent the achievement gap and break cycles of generational poverty and school underachievement. So I'm not an expert on the workforce, but I am a homegrown social entrepreneur. Smart from the Start is about 10 years old. Now, I'm looking at Marie because she's been around since the very beginning, has been a big supporter of our initiative, as was the late, great Mayor Menino, who we miss greatly. And so I'll talk a little bit about our model, which is very different than a traditional early education model, and then talk a little bit about how we support our workforce in the community at large. So, as I said, our organization is both ecological and holistic because we realize that you can't serve a child in isolation from their family in their community. We know that the only way to ensure long-term success for our young children is by investing not only in the child's development, but also in the families and communities in which they're learning and growing. We believe that by empowering families and communities with the tools, resources, and support they need, then we can finally take a look at how we break some of these perpetual cycles that some of our families have been living in for generations. And the truth is, you know, having grown up in a housing project myself, I realized that there are just the same issues that have plagued the same communities for generations, despite the fact that for decades, you know, we have thrown solutions at these very same problems. And so looking at how we realize that if we keep doing the same thing that we've always done, we're going to continue to get the same thing that we've always gotten in our particular communities. So what we've decided that needs to happen now is that we need to begin to look in our own communities for solutions to these challenges. And the way that Smart from the Start does that is by investing in our communities. So the staff that serve our families, our children and families, come from the communities that we serve. And just like Marie was alluding to, there is a great deal of potential in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and we need to mine our communities for those gems and invest in their professional development. So we employ young folks from the community. We bring them in as paraprofessionals. We pay them a living wage from the very beginning. We provide for them opportunities to take classes, get certifications, and to go back to school and continue. As a matter of fact, we push them to do that. And as they continue to gain professional development, then we continue to let them grow. In our organization, we have two young folks here today who may think they're not young. They're young to me, mother of 5. My oldest is going to law school, Marie. 24, and they've moved up through the ranks.
Yes, congratulations.
Yes, I just adopted a 2-year-old, just turned 3, so number 5. But these young people have come into our organization as program assistants, and one now is an associate director at our program. So we bring folks in from the community. We serve families now in 6 languages. So we're serving children and families in 7 neighborhoods, 22 program sites across the city in 6 languages. Some of the programs that we provide are prenatal programs. We have prenatal education, parenting education programs. We have a Smart Start newborn home visiting program. We have Baby Basics, where we help young families in the community learn how to take care of their newborns and how to step confidently into their role as their child's first teacher and advocate. We provide toddler and preschool play-to-learn groups so that our children are learning and growing in their own communities, and all of our programs are place-based. So we actually embed ourselves in the communities where our families live, and we exclusively serve a population of families who don't have easy access to traditional early childhood education. So these are kids who primarily are home during the day. They're either home or they're in unlicensed family, friend, and neighbor care, which is what we call folks who are babysitting. For folks who can't afford early education and care or don't have access to a voucher. So we're working with families in Boston Housing. We serve families in residential substance abuse treatment facilities. We work very closely with Casa Mirna. We're providing services in domestic violence, safe houses, some homeless shelters, and BCYF community centers. And we're providing, all of the programs that we provide are absolutely free of charge. We provide GED classes, ESOL classes, financial literacy classes. We provide mandated parenting classes for court-involved families, and the majority of the families that we serve have incredible strengths and resiliencies, but are struggling with a number of complex issues. So we're looking at families who other social service organizations deem difficult or impossible to engage or unresponsive. Those are the families that we specifically target, and these are the children that are falling headfirst into the achievement gap. So we begin with families prenatally. We bring families in, we do a great deal of crisis intervention. We have licensed professional therapists that work for us. We have a program that we call Address the Stress, which we coined Address the Stress because we have a great stigma in our community around mental health and behavioral health services. So we decided, the young people and I in the organization got together and decided everybody is stressed. Everybody talks about being stressed. So we would call the program Address the Stress, and it's run by community-based mental health clinicians who resemble the communities that we serve. So we have Haitian Creole speaking, bilingual speaking therapists. We have Spanish speaking therapists who run these informal kind of groups with families to talk about stress. And introduce them to and open the door to some more traditional mental health and behavioral health services, because we are serving a community that is struggling with unbelievable proportions of undiagnosed and untreated trauma. And so we provide this Address the Stress program, which also has a summer camp component, where we bring folks out to the Blue Hills for day camp in the summertime, and the children and the parents together participate in therapeutic interventions. And so we do that as well. We have programs that are specifically for court and gang-involved young fathers that we work closely with street workers and other folks to provide those services. And all of this really, at the end of the day, is about that child. It's about creating environments and families that are going to be conducive to the healthy development of that child. Because no matter how wonderful a Montessori or whatever education you give this child, if that home environment and that community environment is not conducive to their healthy development, that child is not going to thrive and reach its greatest potential. So we're looking at ways, and this is the ecological model, where we provide great curriculum-based early childhood opportunities for young children, and particularly those birth to 3 who don't have access to high quality or really any traditional early care and education. We provide for them an opportunity for them to learn and grow in beautiful settings in their community where they live. We provide families. Our family's average annual income is about $7,000. So we're looking at folks who are not employed. We have a great deal of families that are enrolled with SMART who are undocumented, so are working under the table. We have one mom that was working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day in a hair salon, making $150 a week. Yeah, undocumented. And so we have families that are struggling with multiple challenges. We work very closely with DCF, so we take a lot of DCF referrals in families. And I think the most important thing that we do is we celebrate and introduce our families to their strengths. And so, you know, those of us who have been trained in social services have been trained to address and assess families based on a medical model, like a deficit-based approach, and diagnose what's wrong with the family and then prescribe how we fix it. Instead, what we realize is that families that are struggling with challenges know what's wrong. What they don't know is what's right. And so you know, and this is something that you can't fake. You know, we talk a lot about an asset-based approach, and, you know, it's a buzzword. When you're writing a grant, you know, you need to talk about the asset-based, but it really is about being from the community and understanding that this is the community that nurtured me. I'm a product of these communities, and I know that there are strengths and resiliencies, and there are strengths and resiliencies in every family. And so taking that opportunity to meet families and introduce them to their strengths is a way to, oh, sorry, sorry.
Oh, okay.
She starts a sentence and it's loud, but then
Okay, okay.
Oh, it's the microphone.
okay,
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
Speak into it. Okay.
Sorry. I'm going in and out. And so building relationships with families, that's okay. I have some written materials for you. But building relationships with families, particularly those who have had some challenges, that have a foundation of mutual trust and respect, it really is the result of that strength-based approach. And you know, we have prenatal classes and we have classes running all day long. Sometimes families come in 2 hours late and have completely missed their class. And you know, some folks would say, oh my gosh, you're 2 hours late. You missed your prenatal class. Instead, we say, you took 2 buses and what? Walked 3 blocks. Get in here. Let me make you some cocoa. Sit on down. We'll catch you up on what you missed. You know, you have a great commitment to that baby that you're carrying because you went through a whole lot to get here with us today. And so, you know, as we think about what's important in terms of providing opportunities for early education and care, you know, there is a significant population of families and children who are not in childcare, who do not have access, who are not eligible for a voucher. Exactly.
What would you say? What?
80%.
80%. No access to a voucher or not eligible.
They're in informal.
They're in
Yep.
informal settings.
Yep. Or they're
With
home with
grandma.
their parents. Right, with the neighbor, with whoever they can afford to pay. And so we open up our programs to those informal care providers so that when they come into SMART from the start, they get the same modeling and training that our parents get. They're increasing their ability to provide quality care because we have gym areas, so kids are getting gross motor. You know, they're getting social, the care provider is having that opportunity to avoid that social isolation that she has at home with 5 and 6 kids that she's caring for running around. She doesn't know what to do with. And so providing opportunities embedded in communities where we're providing holistic, ecological, and comprehensive one-stop shopping. You can come into a SMART center and you can visit the clothing pantry. You can get a gift certificate for the fresh food truck. You can sit down with a counselor and talk about what your challenges are. You can take your infant or your toddler or your preschooler to early education programming so they can play and learn and grow in curriculum-based programming with other children. You can go to a parenting class, whether you're mandated or not. You can go on field trips to places that you wouldn't be able to afford. The zoo is expensive. The aquarium, ridiculous. And so families have opportunities to access financial literacy, job training. They can hop on the computer. Desiree over there will help them put their resume together and help them search for a job. There's a whole variety of services that they access. And then the next layer is really that community engagement. So we wouldn't be able to, we don't have a lot of money. We are very grassroots, and we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do without the support of our community partners. So folks like Vital Village at Boston Medical Center that partners with us to do a great deal of our work. The BCYF Community Centers who offer us free space and provide for us some reimbursements for the services that we provide in their centers. Boston Housing that gives us space so that we can provide programming for their residents. Also, folks like WIC programs. We work very closely with our community health center partners so that we are co-facilitating prenatal classes and nutrition classes for our families. We also work with non-traditional partners like Childcare Park. And we have a program that we call the Community Unity Project where we engage local businesses who serve our families in our communities, and we partner with them, and they provide our families with discounts. We have barbers that provide our kids with free haircuts, folks like at Chillon Park that give our kids free or discounted ice cream, and in turn, Smart from the Start will place a Community Unity play space in their business. So You know, if it's a laundromat, we'll put, you know, the little play washers and dryers so that kids are learning, instead of watching Jerry Springer on the TV in a laundromat, they're actually learning how to sort clothes by color and by size with their parents and being able to play to learn. And so those community partnerships, not just with the traditional partners, but also with those non-traditional partners, the mail carrier. You know, we'll have a community unity day. The mail carrier will wear our t-shirt, the bus driver for that particular line, the community policing officer, and really enveloping our kids in communities and families that have the resources and the tools that they need in order to move forward with that child. And that's how we break cycles. And so while we think about how we support early childhood education, and particularly for those tender early years where kids are not in traditional care settings, we need to be able to infuse in that family, in that community, the ability to support that child's learning and that child's growth. And so for our families who, like I said, I mean, we serve families, teen families, grandparents raising their grandkids, you know, folks that are or have been formerly incarcerated, DCF families that are trying to be reunited, and we provide them with supportive, strength-based opportunities to really step confidently into that role. So they learn about parenting. They share experiences. They talk about songs that they sang when they were kids. We put those into the curriculum for them. And so it's a partnership that we develop. And as families become more empowered, we roll them into our family leadership program. We have a trip to Washington, D.C. once a year where we take families and they go up on the Hill and and I can't say lobby because we're not supposed to, but they talk to our delegation. But we have to teach our families about civics. They've got to vote. You know, we had a lot of disappointed folks because things may not have turned out their way. But the empowerment that comes from feeling like you're part of something or you make a difference, your voice makes a difference.
And to Marie's point, the parental empowerment and not about supplanting the role of parent.
Exactly.
You know, especially because, well, for obvious reasons, and underscoring that a parent is a child's first teacher as well.
And they're the one constant in that child. You know, you can be in a great Head Start program for 3 years, but when that child leaves that Head Start program, that parent is going to be with them. When they go to that elementary school, you could have a great elementary school, but that elementary school principal or counselor will not go with them to the parent. The family is the constant in their lives. And so when a child is enrolled in SMART, we serve the whole family. If Uncle Bobby lives in the house and he needs a job and we have a job training program, Uncle Bobby can enroll in that program. It's the village model. It's that village model. And it's about helping families to realize and step into their own greatness. And so we provide these wraparound, we wrap that family around that child, and we wrap the community around that family. And that's the way that we'll break cycles.
Excellent.
Yeah, so you think about Boston, we've got some awesome nonprofits that have been around for a long time, but we work in silos. So we've got some great early education programs, and we've got some great family support programs, and we've got some great community empowerment programs. But we don't work together, and we don't talk.
Well, again,
to each
Marie's
other.
point around coordination. And,
around coordination.
You know, we often say that we are a city that is resource rich and at times results poor, and it is because of a lack of alignment and coordination.
It is, and I think that what we do, while our program is ecological, and we do provide all of these things under one roof, we don't do it alone. So it's about going where other folks don't go. Going into Franklin Hill and into that basement that's drippy and damp, and going in there and renovating that space and creating programs there, and then inviting folks in. It's about building bridges in and out of communities so that folks who ordinarily wouldn't go into those communities to provide services will do so at the invitation of SMART from the start. And so giving families access to resources that they otherwise would not have access to, and giving organizations access to families who truly need their services and have been kind of operating under the radar for generations. So it's about creating those bridges and then helping families feel empowered to get on those bridges and go back out into those communities.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the passion that you bring to it. It's clear, you know, I can feel that from all of you that I don't even know if it's fair to call it labor, but if it is a labor of love. And I know Dr. Ben Siegel has been very happy this evening because as we rolled out the calendar for this series, he said, what about 0 to 3? Yeah. What are you doing for 0 to 3?
Oh, and Smart from the Start is hiring, by the way.
Well,
so
that was my next question.
Yes.
So we thank you for telling us about all the good work at Smart from the Start. And I just wanted to better understand how many, I am curious about that.
Yep.
So just bandwidth. So how many people do you currently employ?
26. We're actually hiring for 2 positions, but when we're fully staffed, we're at 26.
Okay. And then what's the bandwidth and the capacity of the program in terms of, so you said you are in 7 neighborhoods?
Yes.
Speaking 6 languages?
Yes.
And you have 22 programs.
Right, so let me explain how that works. So within a neighborhood, for instance, we'll take Dorchester, for instance. We are in, how many sites are we in Dorchester? 4. We're in BCYF Community Center, Franklin Field. We're in a Casa Myrna safe house. And we are in, what's the 4th? Oh, 2 Casa Myrna houses. Okay, so there are 4. So we don't provide full day, full times at each site. So what we do is we try to play to the strengths of the particular organization. So for Casa Myrna, for instance, one of the places that we work is a teen living program. Okay, for moms, young moms, right? Mm-hmm. And so we go in, they said they needed parenting classes, they need a baby basics education class, and whatever else we provide there. So we provide those services to them a couple of times a week. So in terms of capacity, our capacity in Dorchester, we have a coordinator there, we have program assistants there, we have a program facilitator, and then we have a clinician that works there. But they don't work in that particular site all day, every day. So they move around the neighborhood. So is that why it's hard
to, so that's your staffing structure, but in terms of reach, how many families you're servicing? Can you quantify?
Yes, absolutely. We're serving about 2,200 families across the city. And so there are varying levels of participation. Some folks are at SMART every day. We have our central location is in the Alice Taylor Housing Project in the Thomas Johnson Community Center. It's a standalone building there. And so some families will come and sit and spend the whole day with us. Other families we see for a family fun night because we got them a job or they're in school and they're working. So when families first come into the organization, oftentimes they're in crisis.
Well, you know how we were saying that for children that usually the only constant in their life is their parent? You guys have clearly become extended family and are a constant.
So they come
in the lives of the whole family.
Right, so they come and go.
Yeah, but we thank you for your holistic approach and just how specialized it is as well. Yeah. So it's standardized, but also specialized, and so we thank you for that. Yeah. Councilor Wu, do you have any questions? Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your good work. For your president. Oh.
Positions that were hired, average salary.
So our early childhood professionals, whether they are degreed or not, does have a bearing on where they start. But our starting salary is $42,500.
Okay.
And so that is for and that is for folks. You do not have a degree to qualify for this.
I've visited here in Mattapan.
It goes up to 55.
With benefits.
And so, in terms of benefits, just very quickly, you get 3 weeks off, plus a bonus week. All of our staff get off the time between Christmas and New Year's. We have great health care benefits. We pay 80% Blue Cross Blue Shield, but no deductibles. No deductibles at all.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah, no deductibles.
Some people came to testify with other organizations, and you're poaching them. You're poaching them, okay? So.
We travel to conferences. We're members of the National Black Child Development Institute. So we go to conferences. We're members of 0 to 3.
Okay. All right, we're sold. Okay.
You can talk to Associate Director of Programs.
Okay. All right, great. We're sold. Okay.
All
right. Okay. All right. And so, bringing up the rear here, we save the best for last. We've been talking about her throughout the evening. We want to thank all of you for hanging in there with us. This is Renee Boyne-Jarrett, the founding director of Vital Village Network, and also an associate professor of pediatrics at Boston University School of Medicine. So,
well, I wanted to thank our counselors for holding this hearing and for making the time. I'm honored to be invited, and this is my crew. I love the people that stay to the end because that's where the work happens, right? So I just have 4 brief points to make this evening around this topic. The first is around pay for prevention. The second is around quality care and the importance of a trauma-sensitive model and trauma-informed frameworks and professional development. The next is around neighborhoods of opportunity and the fundamental role of early childhood enrichment and child care in creating those neighborhoods. And the final point is around this is all of us, all right? So 50 years ago, a landmark study concluded. The Perry Preschool Project. Some of you in the room have heard about this project. Began in 1962, ended in 1967. Over 128 kids were enrolled. They were randomized. They were enrolled between the ages of 3 and 4, African American children from low-income homes who were given high quality. The group that got the intervention got high quality preschool. The ratio was 6-to-1 for children to providers who had professional development and training, and they followed those kids over time. Now, the goal of the Perry Preschool Project was to improve economic outcomes for the families, as well as to improve early childhood, early elementary school performance for the children. And they saw some gains for the families that actually ended up slipping over time around the family's economic circumstances. And they saw some improvements in early childhood performance. They showed less years of special education, some slightly higher performance in early childhood. But the true and most profound benefits of this program were actually not seen in the short term. They were not seen in the first year or 2 of the program. They were not seen in the 3 to 5 years that followed the program. The true and most valuable benefits of the program was that the kids who had Perry Preschool were 44% more likely to graduate from high school. They were 33% less likely to have any jail time or involvement with the law. They were 1/3 less likely to be involved with violent crimes. As they entered their late 20s into their 40s, they were more likely to be engaged in long-standing employment. They had higher income. They had greater familial stability. And then someone decided to look at their health outcomes. So from mid-30s forward, they had less metabolic syndrome, lower rates of diabetes, lower risk for stroke, and heart disease. So this program was not designed as health care. It was not designed as preventive health care or public health. It was an educational program in early childhood that when we actually followed the children far into their futures, we saw tremendous outcomes, bigger outcomes than you can find from any of the interventions that you can come into the hospital that I love and work at to reduce diabetes risk or obesity risk or heart disease risk. Their outcomes were far past that. Now, Perry Preschool isn't the only project. This has been replicated in rural communities. There's another very famous longitudinal study that shows the very same outcomes. And it's what everyone's already been talking about. When we talk about children as our treasure, as our gem, as our investment, right? But where are the meaningful, visible policies that do that. And we understand this. If we look at the brain science, right? Your brain development in the first 5 years of life is tremendous and unlike what it will ever be later in life. And even me, I've gone to medical school and done all of this studying, had to sit down and think about what's going on here, right? You were born, if I was an infant right now, you know, I'd have a thumb, right? It'd just be a smaller version of this thumb I have right here. The brain is not like that. What is your brain like when you are born? Your brain is shaped by the social experiences that you have from the prenatal period on through early childhood. And that shaping, that pruning, that learning that occurs in those earliest years influence the expression of your genes, and it influences the potential for your brain. So your brain is not a tiny thumb. You know, babies are born, it's 10 fingers, 10 toes, X, Y, and Z. The brain isn't like that. The brain is absolutely developed and shaped in relationship to your social environment. So this is why the Perry Preschool Project makes sense, but we keep missing it. We keep missing it because we silo the funding, we have education funding, we have health and safety funding, we have this, all of these different pockets that are supporting different things. When we look at early childhood, we have to realize that is not how it works. So we have to invest in and pay for prevention. And we have a huge gap between everything we understand from this public health research, our economic research, our neuroscience research, and what our policies actually do. You do not have access to public education. It's not universal for everyone in this state until when? Kindergarten, right? That's when you can access enrichment. In some states in our country, it's not even kindergarten isn't even guaranteed, right? But we know our brain development in the first 5 years of life is profound. So that is not a knowledge gap, that's not a science gap, that is a policy gap. It's a policy gap between what we know about how human beings develop and what we do. So we have to profoundly think about that. So the next point I want to make is around quality. So I had the privilege of being a part of a group of folks who were working on universal pre-K across the city of Boston. Many people in this room were a part of that. We engaged over 1,500 parents in a survey. What was the most important thing to parents that happened for their child in preschool? Was it that they learned their ABCs? Was it that they learned how to count? Was it that they learned their numbers? No, it was that they were in a safe and nurturing environment that supported their self-confidence and their development of their social emotional well-being. Parents in this city understand what we are trying to get our policies and programs to do for social emotional learning. This is no longer new information for parents. They get it, and that's what they want. They don't want their children just memorizing things. They want their social emotional development to happen, and you know what? They are right. Because a child that enters kindergarten with strong social emotional learning foundation is 4 times more likely to go to college and graduate from college. So that information is out there. The social emotional development is the foundation on which you can then learn. If you cannot sit in a chair, if you cannot regulate your body, if you cannot do all of those things, you cannot kind of proceed to learn. And this is why a trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed framework is also vitally important. In our schools right now, 1 in 4 children have been exposed to a major trauma. Every year in this country, 1 in 3 children will be exposed to violence. And we know in many communities, based on what your zip code is and where you live, your rate for chronic, daily, ongoing stressors is much, much higher. We expect these children to sit and be attentive and learn, but your body, if you are not feeling safe, your attention and energy is going to be focused on safety, not on learning new material, not on mastering your social environment, not on mastering those new skills. So we have it backwards, because we can't keep throwing information at children if we're not really working to support them and support all of their needs. So that's why caregivers and everyone who's involved in the life of a child needs to understand what trauma does to learning, and what we can do to support resilience. The ability for a child to rebound, the ability for them to shield and to be protected from adversities they may face in the future, and the ability of them to recover and to heal. The human brain and the human body has a huge capacity for recovery and for healing. And we need to tap into that and to promote that. But also by using a trauma-informed framework, we can help prevent and mitigate a lot of adversities that children are exposed to. So we can all do better together. So I want to flag that as well. And part of that trauma-informed framework is taking care of the caregivers, is taking care of their wellness and their well-being, is investing in their mental health and their quality of life. And I don't need to repeat what has already been well said with data that is way beyond what I understand, but the situation we are in right now, with not even providing a living wage to people who are caring for children in our society, is not random. This is based in legacies, right? Legacies of inequity, legacies of strong inequities that have to do with the way in which we treat specific segments of the workforce and what we had before we had a workforce, right? Okay, what we were dealing with before that. So we have to realize we are not at this point for a random set of reasons. And we have to kind of deal with all of that history. We also have to deal with historical trauma, right? Because we have communities of people who are caring for children. Sherry already said, 80% kids. Who are they being cared for, and who are they being cared for by? And what are the histories of trauma that those neighborhoods and communities have been exposed to? And how is that impacting the enrichment in early childhood? We cannot shy away from this. We really have to face it. So this gets us to what we've all been talking about and encouraging and addressing around neighborhoods of opportunity. Now, we know adverse childhood experiences impact children in profound ways and are deep social determinants of health over the life course. Now, adverse community environments are seeds of where some of these adverse experiences come from. Community trauma, residential segregation, historic divestment from neighborhoods, all impact the opportunity structures that exist within communities. And we have to really think about our collective investment in the well-being of children. And, you know, this example really struck me. As I was sitting here, I reflected back on my first child care experience, which was Mrs. Priester, family friend in kin care. She was a woman who went to our church. She had a lovely yard that was fenced. There were tricycles, mud pies with the daisies on top, and all of that kind of stuff. And it was just a wonderful creative environment. And then my first experience of, you know, was a loving environment, is how I would describe it. And then my first experience of center-based care, per se, was a Head Start, Vincent K. Tibbs. And we were called the Love Bugs. That was the name of our classroom, right? But at the end of the day, that is also what I remember, sharing, taking care of each other. When we graduated, we sang, "We Are Family." Those were the principles and the values that were instilled at a very early time. And it's not random that I do what I do now, because I had that community and level of support. Just 2 months ago, I'm a parent of 3 kids. My child care situation fell apart, and I was a mess. I'm still a mess. I mean, you can't even look at my clothes. It's just dramatic. And I'm a person who I have 2 sisters, I have a mom, I have a mother-in-law, I have a lot of, I'm a pediatrician, I know people. It was a mess. We allow families to live on a razor's edge around responsibility and care. We have to reverse this model. It has to be a village. It has to be a community of people who are taking on investment in the lives of all of the children. It should not just fall down on the parents. And when we talk about this, we seem to think we're talking about a certain group of children and not other children. We're not talking about privileged children and privileged families. We're talking about low-income children and low-income families. That is simply not true. If you look at parents across America, and this is what we miss when we talk about this, if you look at parents across America, they are deeply unhappy. They feel deeply isolated in their efforts to care for their children, and they feel like their bandwidth is limited. This is important to this story we're talking about around childcare and education and quality. Everybody has an investment in this. We can all connect to this in a very human way. And we need to really think about how we're organized as a society and what policies and systems we're demanding support the best outcomes for children. This is just not, we as a society will be judged by how well we do for our children. Our children are citizens who do not have a voice in our political process. We have to speak for them. We have to envelop a society that truly invests in them as human beings and in their development, their enrichment. Now, families can make their own personal decisions about what they would like to have, but whether it is offered at a high quality and in a rigorous and transparent way, we have to take responsibility for. That's a moral and ethical responsibility we have as a society. We don't like to talk about it that way, but it's actually the reality that we as a society should be judged by what we are doing and how well our children are doing. So that's part of it. And then I just like, so this is really all of us. And I'd just like to end with sharing a little bit about, we've made some publicly available data on a website around early care and education using some of the data from Mass Department of Early Education and Care. I'm not saying our data is perfect, but I'd love for you to take a look at it, give us some feedback, look at your districts, look at your communities, and share with us. But we took this publicly available data and we looked, because as a pediatrician, the situation I was just in as a parent, I see every time I'm in clinic with families constantly having their whole system kind of shattered by a care center that closes down overnight. And there's no accountability, there's no community support for that. And they have to figure out, what they're gonna do, or they can slide into, loss of a job and loss of a home and a series of pileups that occur as a result of our failure to really support parents in their effort in a better way. So we looked. Between 2011 and 2016, there were 739 new early child care and education centers that opened across Boston City and Boston Metro. How many of those opened in Boston? 2. In the data. Of the 739, there are 2.
From 2011 to 2016.
From 2011 to 2016. So I'd love for someone to say that our data is wrong on that, but we all know we have kind of a space issue and other things like that. I think it's right in terms of those that were reported, right? There were the rate of engagement in early child care and education, when we look across the neighborhoods, is about 1 in 3 kids. So we have resources, we have a limited number of kids who are actually really engaging. And then when we looked at NAEYC standards for high quality early care, it's about less than 2 centers for a 20-block group radius in Boston City versus 8.5 in the Boston metro area in a 20-block group radius. So we're seeing some differences that are significant as well. And so that makes the information we're hearing from families, you know, that same survey of 1,500 families, most families residing in low-income areas could not find care for their children in areas. We saw differences for Hispanic and African American families in terms of the extent to which they could find preschool or early care in their neighborhoods or close to where they worked. And we saw differences in the experience for parents who had children who had attended preschool, differences in their feeling that this had been a safe experience for their children. So we have to address these things, and we need to leverage data in a much more meaningful way, a much more transparent way, so that we can all hold ourselves accountable.
And I thank you so much. Very informative. We will be looking at that data. We are very upset that you to hear those numbers. But again, as you said, in leveraging the data in a meaningful way, it does hold us all accountable. We love that word, transparency. And so we'll continue to push for that. And just thank you for your approach and how you just bring your full heart and the confluence of all your experiences to bear in this role. And your previous participation in similar discussions around traumas, continue to push for our schools to be trauma sensitive and informed. And I just thank you for your partnership in that and for being here this evening. Councilor Wood, did you have any questions for Renee?
Just one. What's your recommendation on the best data sources for all of this?
I think, you know, I kind of think we need to have a children's trust data version across our city. We need to decide as a city that we're going to have a central place, a central repository, where information from Head Start, information from early child care and quality information needs to be housed, and that we are holding ourselves responsible as we're determining policy focuses for utilizing that data or deciding what gaps exist in that data that we then need data to address. There are amazing programs that are happening. As Sherry, look at the mobilization of resources that a small community-based engine that can do. And we see this all the time. There are other parents in the audience who are champions, and they're out there, they're civically engaging, they're participating, training opportunities that are provided, they are taking advantage of those, and we do need to respect that wisdom that they bring to the table, those experiences, those solutions that they've thought of. And some of that is not reflected in the data, and we have to do a better job of capturing some of those solutions and that wisdom to inform the design of our programs moving forward.
Well, is there anyone else, anyone else who would like to testify? This is the end of our formal sort of panel of experts. Okay.
Or pre-K and having those kind of spectrum and how the parents and families are dealing with that, and even the school system are dealing with that.
Okay. Dr. Siegel?
One model, Tulsa, Oklahoma, came together over a 20 to 25 year period and have got universal preschool, parent-child, workforce issues, etc. A lot of it was federally funded. But they, as a city, were able to organize what you are asking for. And that is, what is the information we need? We have all of these children being born, so we know when kids are born. We have all of the neighborhood health centers. We've got to figure out how to connect an infrastructure And then infrastructure, in my view, is the city's responsibility.
Very good. Well, we have our marching orders. I want to thank everyone for hanging in there with us, but I have to say it was compelling. So the time it's hard to believe that we've been here. It is 9 o'clock, and we've been here since 6:30. So thank you for this long march. We have our marching orders coming out of this. We thank all of you for what you do every day relative to the well-being, the development of our children. And we thank you for your expert counsel this evening. And we have many takeaways, and we appreciate how prescriptive and specific all of you were. Councilor Wu, any final statements?
Thank you.
All right then, and we'll adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, and we want to thank Catholic Charities and the Library Center. Jake, thank you so much. And we'll be back. Okay, all right. And we want to thank Central staff. Thank you guys for staying and for making us look good up here, okay? All right.
Thank you.